We're ready for the start. They're off.
Welcome into It's Official. Jeremy Plonk, Jeff Siegel with First Bet and Express Bet. You know, every Tuesday we like to recap the weekend. We have Kentucky Derby reactions this week, so this is a special show. And thanks to all the viewers last week who watched It's Official. Many of you for the first time. Great numbers, the best show we've ever done. Top across the channel. Really proud of the performance of the public coming out to see It's Official last week. So hopefully you're back this week and will be with us going down the road. Jeff, we've got a lot of roads to travel this week when we look back at the Kentucky Derby. Some good, some bad, some ugly, some in between, and some fantastic performances on the track.
It was a great weekend of racing. I'm wearing red today because I was in the red. I'm not shy about telling you when I do well, but and I didn't gamble that much, so I'm not worried about the money. I think last week's show of It's Official, it went along. I think it was like 55 minutes, and I think hopefully there was something in that 55 minutes that we said that came out correct. But I wasn't real happy with my performance. I went back and all I could do was like the NBA guys do, go back and watch the film and see what happened and make adjustments. So we'll do that. But in retrospect, it was a good Derby. It was a clean Derby for the most part. We had some issues leading up to that, but I think we saw some really good performances, some of which I expected, and some of them surprised me, and vice versa as well. So we got a lot to talk about, a lot to speculate on, and then maybe a lot to look forward to as well.
Let's go to our first of 5 topics on the big board, and we're just going to rip the Band-Aid off and get this one right off the top. Great sport shown at Churchill Downs on the first Saturday in May, but some bad publicity. This was not what we wanted to see in the days leading up to the Kentucky Derby or through Derby Day, with 7 horses having to be euthanized for various injuries and fatalities at Churchill Downs during the course of Derby week. It got a lot of negative press, Jeff, as well as it should. The New York Times, People Magazine, NPR, local WDRB, all around the world, the talk was about the horses who perished at Churchill Downs as much as it was the Derby itself. Saffie Joseph became a lightning rod as he was banned by Churchill Downs from entering horses. That took Lord Miles out of the Kentucky Derby, one of 5 scratches. The other scratch is not related in this manner so much. We did have the death of Wild on Ice a week before the Kentucky Derby after he was injured in a training accident at Churchill Downs. So this was a rough go, no question about it, an absolutely bad patch. And, you know, when you have the spotlight on you and you have eyes on you like you do in the Kentucky Derby that don't see you the rest of the year, something like this is magnified, and it's a bad deal, and it's a big deal that the fatalities in racing continue to plague as a bad omen for the industry and a bad light to shine upon it. I can tell you this is, you know, each Derby, I get several texts, as you do as well, from friends who aren't racing fans who want to know who you like in a Derby, I can tell you this year, my wife got more texts after the Derby saying, why are the horses dying, than I got people asking me to handicap before. That's a ratio you don't want to see, and that's reality. I mean, it's just my individual personal story, but I know it means a lot, because if you turned on the TV, you saw the ticker, the bottom of the screen, that sort of thing like that. The horse deaths were a big deal in the mainstream media. And I know everybody is an ambulance chaser when it comes to the media, no pun intended, but that gets the views, dirty laundry, right? As Don Henley sang about. But nonetheless, we don't want that kind of laundry anytime in racing, much less Kentucky Derby week. So how do we trudge through it?
Well, I know here, this hits home here in California at Santa Anita where I work, and we had this same storyline 3 years ago, I guess it was, and the track itself really cracked down on how they went about judging whether horses were fit enough to run and were at risk of going wrong or getting hurt. When this entailed a really significant amount of pre-race inspection. Nothing was, no horse was allowed to run unless they were 100% perfect. And also, now you have to report when you when you want to work out a horse, you got to tell the racing office before you work that you're going to work, and so that the vets can watch. And it's just really, really done a great job, and the results have been spectacular with regards to the statistics that have been 180 degrees turned. Now it's so rare when we get to have a horse injured, and the reason for that is because it's so rare that a horse that's not 100% is allowed to run, and it's something that other venues are going to have to do.
Right.
Churchill Downs did it with their Derby horses, but I wonder how vigilant they were on some of the other undercard races and other races. So there's no one wants to hear complaining, and boy, did we hear a lot of that, from trainers who had their horses scratched. It's bigger than whether or not your horse can start or not. And I know that there are some tracks that will look the other way, and other racing jurisdictions who don't emphasize it. But I mean, you have to follow what Santa Anita has done, what the Stronach Group has done here, First Racing, and you cannot have that happen in your racetrack, or especially on a big day. Or this is what happens, because all the goodwill that you're trying to get for the biggest day in racing goes out the window. Nobody talks about the Derby. They talk about the deaths. I had some people say, 7 horses in the Kentucky Derby died. No, they didn't. They weren't all in the Kentucky Derby, It was one of them, and some of them were prevented from running because of a pre-race inspection that may not have been done in the past. So, I mean, it's a wake-up call. It always is. And every time we wake up, we got to get another one, because it's not this issue is never going to go away. It's just more magnified now than it's ever been.
And to tighten those restrictions and those inspections before a race, and the scans and the veterinary, physical exams and visual exams and things like that, you're going to see more scratches. You guys have seen that at Santa Anita, right? I mean, more horses are taken out of the entries than in the past because they don't pass the inspection. That's what we had with the Kentucky Derby favorite, Forte. And Forte was declared a scratch on Derby morning. Now, his problems began a couple days before that. Let's go and look at the timeline here of what happened with Forte, an unfortuitous week for the Derby favorite, if you will. On Thursday morning, May 4th, he was doing a routine, jog and gallop during the Dawn at the Downs program at Churchill Downs. And on videotape, this bobble was caught. Let's take a look at it. It's going to happen here about 4 or 5 seconds into the video as Forte proceeds. And right here, the bobble's going to take place, and that's enough that he caught himself somewhere and went off. For Forte and 1,000-pound, 1,100-pound animal like that, sometimes that's all it takes to cause something like a foot bruise. And why do we think it's a foot bruise? Well, Mike Rapoli told Byron King of the Blood Horse it was a foot bruise. Todd Pletcher told Dave Grenning of Daily Racing Form that he cut a quarter of the shoe off the back to take pressure off the heel. So there was an admission that there was an injury to Forte by both the trainer and the owner. So when the inspection happened and he was taken out of the Kentucky Derby, that wasn't a satisfactory result to Rapoli and Pletcher, who publicly went out and said they thought the horse should have been able to run. Jeff, with the intense scrutiny, with everything that happened in the days leading up to the Derby, with the deaths, these things are not directly correlated, but they absolutely positively have an impact on the perception and what can and should be done. I think it was the right move to take Forte out of the Kentucky Derby. I'm 100% behind that decision. And I wanted Forte. It caused me a ton more work. Like, that matters to anybody on earth. But like, I have a very big vested interest, and I wanted Forte to be in that race. I wanted to bet him. I had written and done a ton of work all around him that all had to be kind of ripped up, changed, and maneuvered around. So I just want that to be like, somebody's like, oh, well, you're against Forte, or you're against Pletcher or Rapoli or something like that. Nonsense. I was absolutely for the horse. Every bet I was going to make had him on top as a single in the Kentucky Derby. But I agree with the decision here, especially in light of what happened during the course of the week.
I had a Hall of Fame trainer, I won't say who it is, at Santa Anita, tell me that 2 weeks ago, he didn't like the way that colt was traveling, galloping. But you hear that all the time. So I just kind of in one ear and out the other. And I mean, it's just... But then when he was scratched, I can't say I was surprised. But what I was really surprised with and disappointed, quite frankly, were some of the comments, especially during the past couple of weeks when we lost so many horses. And The pressure was on for Churchill to put on a clean race. I mean, when I say a clean race, a race that didn't have any injuries or pull-ups
Right.
or and things like that. And I thought maybe the connections, as disappointed as they had to have been, took a stance that the vet was wrong. They should have let him run. And man, now that may have been true. They may have believed that. I'm sure they thought he could run and do well. But the risk of allowing that horse to run on Saturday, given all of the information that had been disclosed prior to the race, and if he had gone out there and gotten injured, I mean, I don't know if this sport would ever recover. I mean, that's over dramatizing it to a certain extent, but not really, because and yet. What I wanted to hear was, we think he could have run, but we respect the vet. He probably, given the fact that he's not 100%, he should not run. We're going to get this horse right. It's a long year. I know it's only one Derby, but the horse comes first. Right. I didn't hear any of that. Right. And that was disappointing to me.
Yeah, and the trainers had 62 starters in the Derby coming into this. This isn't a once-in-a-life opportunity.
Right.
Rapoli's had many horses set for the Kentucky Derby. He did have bad luck with Uncle Mo as well, who was scratched on Derby morning. I get that part. But he also bought into, Mo Donegal right after the Wood Memorial, I think it was last year, and ended up leading him into the winner's circle after just purchasing the horse a couple weeks prior. Right. So there are ways to overcome bad luck in this game with some good fortune as well. Right. And so, look, Forte doesn't care that he ran in the Kentucky Derby or not. The humans around him, and we do care if he ran in the Derby. So the best thing for Forte was to protect him, and the best thing for the interest of the industry was to protect him. Then I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Now we have the situation for the Preakness where the horse was put on the vets list because he was a vet scratch from the Kentucky Racing Commission. He has to be on the vets list for 2 weeks. He can't come off the vets list until after blood is taken and also a workout to show that he's healthy and ready to come off the vets list. So he will not be in the Preakness, barring any kind of legal injunction or something like that. And I just think that would be a horrible idea to try to get in and try to find some legal way to wrangle this horse into the field. Because like you said, the risk just simply isn't worth it. If the horse gets injured in the race, you'll never hear the end of it. It reminds me a little bit of Big Brown in 2008 going into the Belmont Stakes. Dutrow was out. Look, we patched his foot together, right? We knew even the materials that were used to patch his foot together, and he had a lot of foot problems before the Belmont Stakes. And then he pulled up at the top of the stretch, and to this day, we're still told we have no reason why he pulled up. But for 2 weeks before the Belmont, we were told he had a bum foot, and they were trying to patch it together and do everything they could to get him to the race. It's just such a bad look, and the whole Big Brown situation caused, the demise of steroids, Winstrol, all those kind of things used in horse racing. So it does have a big impact when something like that happens on the big stage like that. Can completely change the game. And so it certainly didn't get us any more fans with what happened with Big Brown in that situation, nor would anything involving Forte develop more fans as well if something bad were to happen. There's no feel-good story. I mean, if he comes back and wins the Preakness Stakes, I mean, it's not Willis Reed, right? I mean, nobody's talking about some guy coming out of the locker room for the Knicks in the 1968 finals in the NBA, as I'm dating myself. But there's no feel-good story Forte got revenge or something like that in the Preakness. That's humanistic, there's no revenge story there. There's no justification, or what are you going to do? Put a thumb in the eye of the vet who scratched him in the Derby saying, see, I told you he was healthy. There's no positive to come out of it. So get him healthy, look to the Travers, circle the date, and get to the Travers with the preps that you think are best for the particular horse. I love Forte. I want him to run again, but I don't want him to run in the Preakness under this kind of circumstance.
No, a question. I mean, remember AP Indy scratched the morning of the Derby because he wasn't right. Other trainers may have run him anyway. Neil Drysdale did not. I remember Majestic Prince in 1969 was going for the Triple Crown. He bowed a tendon between the Preakness and the Belmont, and he ran, even though Johnny Longdon, the trainer, insisted that he not. It got overruled by the owner, and and Bill Hartack, who rode him, never let him run because he just wanted him to get around the racetrack.
Yeah.
And he finished second to Arts and Letters. Canyonero was not the same horse for the Belmont, but he had the whole country behind him. They ran him. Sports Illustrated had a cover story the 3 days after the race, or 4 days, whenever it came out. Canyonero should not have run, and had all the details on that. So, nowadays, back then, you might be able to get away with it. You can't do that anymore.
No.
You got to be careful. It's too much negative publicity going around, and I hope somebody learned. I hope people who are involved, maybe not with Forte, but other people, other trainers, don't take that chance. Right. I mean, you can't do it. That's just life. Nobody is owed the Kentucky Derby. I'm sorry. Right. If you have the favorite and he gets hurt, hey, join the club, right? So, don't complain and cry about it. Just be thankful that the state vet prevented you from making a big mistake potentially.
Right.
So,
and one last point to this is, as we look towards a potential Preakness and that vets list situation, if you were to legally challenge the validity of the vets list, think of the Pandora's box you have just opened up. Even if you think Mike Rapoli and Todd Pletcher are the most noble men on earth, and they very well may be, and they have a legal challenge and they win a legal challenge, what scumbag do you think is not going to take advantage of the loophole in that law moving forward, right? You have just opened things up to, like, you don't like Jason Service? You don't like Jorge Navarro? You don't think if there's a way to get around the vets list because of some legal injunction that was posed in 2023, you don't think they would use that to their advantage in the future? These things are put in place to protect the horses. And if there's a mistake, adjudication, or whatever you want to say that goes along with it, remember the reason that it's there. The reason it's there is to protect the horse. And I know I sound like I'm on a soapbox with that, but I just think you get into, if there's some sort of league, I don't think there will be. Again, I don't think there will be, but there's talk, what if you were to do something like that? If you were to get into the legal system and start to challenge whether or not you can legally put the horse on the vets list, how they had to administer and all these other things, heaven forbid, what are we looking at? People are going to be getting stays of the vet list. Oh, well, I've challenged it, and until the court rules I can or can't come off the list, I have a stay in it. We don't want that. We've had enough of the stuff with all the Baffert suspensions and everything over the last 2 years of, is this horse able to run? Is this horse not able to run? Right. What are the rules this week? What are the rules next week? We don't want any more of that. We don't want to talk about it anymore, but we thought it was very important. And on this show, we try to be straight honest with you. And that's why we took the first 16 minutes of the show today to address the elephant, the big elephant in the room for horse racing. Now, let's talk about, we said, great sport, bad publicity. Let's talk about the great sport side of this year's Kentucky Derby, Jeff. 150,335, the attendance on Kentucky Derby Day. It was back to pre-COVID excitement in terms of the huge crowd there. $288 million was bet on the Kentucky Derby Day crowd. That was a record, not only a record, but $15 million more than the previous record. So this was a huge Derby Day. It was a record Oaks Day, and it was a record Kentucky Derby week for that Tuesday through Saturday now at Churchill Downs. Business was bustling despite all the bad news.
Well, the sport was great. I mean, you take away all the other stuff and you look at the racing and the horses that ran, and some great storylines. And Mage himself is a great storyline. He was magnificent. There was no question about that. And I do think that Mage is a legitimate horse. Let's not forget, this was just his fourth career start. He was thoroughly professional. We talked extensively about Mage last week and how he may very well have been better than Forte in the Florida Derby if he hadn't made that premature move. And this time, could you have ridden a horse better than Tastiano did on this colt? I mean, a perfect ride, perfectly timed, never missed a beat, and won with a colt that I liked. Didn't go there, unfortunately, with my selection. That I regretted it. About the eighth pole, I'm saying, I think I made a mistake here.
I think a lot of people thought they were in trouble with the eighth pole, except Two Phils. Two Phils was feeling good about himself at that point. The thing about Mage, before we go back and take a look at his win, had the next race been like, say, the Bluegrass Stakes at 1 1/8 against a 10-horse field, I would have had him right there, because I really think he's a great horse, a great prospect. The debut, I could not get out of my mind. His second start was really thrown to the wolves, and he was decent, but then he got good in the Florida Derby again. I thought, this is one of the better horses in the crop, but at 1.125 miles against 10 horses, yes, you'd have taken him. But in the Kentucky Derby, you think the 1.25 miles, the 126 pounds versus, say, 122 in a prep, all the hullabaloo that goes with it, the inexperience, the larger field size. It was so much to overcome for a horse that, okay, he didn't race as a 2-year-old. That's one thing that, only Justify was being able to do in the Century. The 3 career starts, only like Big Brown, Justify, and Regret were able to do that. So he had like 2 major hurdles, and they're not like Derby rules or some kind of like funky little stat. That actually is like, how much is your odometer read, right? I mean, how much mileage do you really have as an experienced racehorse? He overcame all of that and did so on the biggest stage of all. Let's go back and watch with the call here from NBC Sports and Larry Colmus. The Kentucky Derby will pick it up on the backstretch. Mage still has some work to do, but they're going fast enough up front.
This opening quarter mile was quicker than we expected, 45.73 seconds. And then it's Reincarnate running in third to the outside. Two Phils follows in fourth, Confidence gained fifth. Hit Show is sixth, he's racing 6 lengths off the lead. Break of another 2 to Rocket Pan. And then Raise King to the inside. Disarm is next. Mandarin Hero has 9 lengths to make up, and fellow Japanese runner Dermaso Takaki has moved through on his inside. Angel of Empire has passed a few too. He's down on the rail as they make their way around the far turn. Kings Barnes, the undefeated runner for Todd Pletcher, is the leader. Here's 2 Phils making a move on the inside, and the 2 of them hook up, and Jareth Loveberry has taken 2 Phils to the front. And Kings Barnes is running in second. Hit Show is circled up on the outside as they come to the top of the stretch, and they're into the stretch, and 2 Phils has turned for home on top. Kings Barnes, here's Mage coming strongly down the outside. Angel of Empire is putting in his run, and there's 1 furlong to run. 2 Phils on the inside, trying to hold up Mage. Mage has taken the lead here as they come into the final 16th, and it is going to be Mage to win the Kentucky Derby. And then it was 2 Phils, Angel of Empire in a photo. Disarm was fourth. Mage has done it in 2:01.57 seconds under Javier Castellano.
So Javier Castellano, 6,000 wins in his career, but had only had the 1 Triple Crown victory, Jeff, that in 2006 with Bernardini in the Preakness Stakes, so that he didn't get to celebrate, right? That was the year of Barbaro and all the tragedy that happened, and it was almost a hush over Pimlico. This is the first time Castellano got to celebrate really on the big stage, and textbook ride. I mean, he gave this horse not a straw in his path. This is what you want to see. He outkicked the kickers because Angel of Empire had every right to come and get him too, and he was considered one of the best kickers in the race. He had that same trip right behind Mage, and Mage would have none of it. He pulled away from that one, and what a really good performance.
This might be a really good horse. I mean, this is his 4th start. He won his debut. He had an excuse in the second start simply because he was going 1 mile and 1/8, and he was, part of a pace and a lack of experience and maybe fitness, and didn't run badly that day. We talked about this Florida Derby and how a better ride could have won that race, maybe should have won that race. And this time, he got the great ride. Javier rode this horse like a horse, like an experienced jockey. He didn't panic. He said, "I got a game plan. I'm going to stick to it. I'm not going to move too soon." Like I saw the video, like everybody else did in the Florida Derby. Move too soon. I'm going to wait. And this colt ran just a terrific race for his 4th lifetime start. Even if it had been his 10th lifetime start, it would have been great. The number came up legitimate. He did everything that a good horse is supposed to do. And I tip my hat to his connections. I hate to admit it, but I'm coming clean here. I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to trainers, and I had actually written up that in my analysis that I really like Mage, but I'm just not sure this is a Kentucky Derby winning type of trainer. It's not fair to say that, other than he never really had the chance or the experience of doing that. I'd rather go with someone who maybe has done it. And now that was my undoing in terms of the selection, because Mage going in, I felt he was going to beat Forte. I didn't like Forte that much, but at least I thought Mage was going to beat him, and he was the favorite. So, but it just kind of came back to me that maybe I didn't trust the connections as much as I really should have. And he's a good horse. It was not like last year with Rich Strike, and like, where did that come from?
Right.
This colt belonged. He should have been a contender. I should have given him a better chance than I did, and I let one factor get in my way, and I paid the price, But I don't see any reason why he can't win the Preakness. I'm not saying he will, but I like to see it because nothing's better than having a Triple Crown online in the Belmont Stakes, and I always end up rooting for the Derby winner, even if I don't like him, because I want to have that. I want to get him to the Triple Crown, the Belmont. After that, you're on your own. But I'll try to get you. I'll try to help you get there. And I'd love to see Mage win again. He's from people that they're easy to root for.
Yeah. Gustavo Delgado joins Eric Reed in back-to-back years as trainers you would not have had on your Kentucky Derby radar. And if you don't go back that far in history, who thought Michael Matz would win a Kentucky Derby?
Right.
John Ward, even.
Right.
I mean, he's with Monarch. A lot of these traders have had the horse time, Rick Ducky Brown, and not your everyday, every year Kentucky Derby trainers. And it goes to show when you have the right horse and you have the horse of a lifetime, anything can happen. And sometimes you just got to be magical on that one day, right? I mean, I don't know that Eric Reed may go the rest of his career and still have better horses than Rich Strike. I'm not saying that's the best horse he's ever going to train, but on that day, he absolutely was. So a good horse can come from anywhere, as they like to say in the game. And, this horse didn't come from like completely the south side of the tracks. He was a son of Good Magic, a Derby runner-up.
Right.
I believe he cost $250, $290, something like that at sale. This was not some cheap horse. This wasn't, a horse from the wrong side of the tracks. But I'll tell you what, right now, he's on the right side of the game. Mage, the Kentucky Derby winner, and he'll be that forever. That's the great thing. The historic nature of winning this race. Let's talk about some of the other horses and the other performances on Kentucky Derby Day, Jeff. We'll look at our other, we had the Mage, the Magnificent. We'll go to our third topic, which is our other worthy performances in this race. Of course, you have to look at the second place finisher, Two Phils. How could you run much better of a race and still lose the Kentucky Derby? It wasn't quite Bodemeister, who ran just gangbusters before he got beat by I'll Have Another. Close. Two Phils ran standing race.
Well, I mean, there's so much good that he did in that race, and here's another situation where I outthought myself because we talked about his race at Turfway and how fantastic it was, and I said at the time, if he runs back to that race, he can win the Kentucky Derby. But I also said I don't think he will. So that was the wrong part because I got swayed by the all-weather thing. And he'd run well enough on dirt before that, but he hadn't run well enough to think that he could win a Kentucky Derby. But you had to take it on faith that he was going to run back to the Turfway race, all-weather race on dirt. And I'm not sure there are many horses out there that have run better without winning than Two Phils did. He was the only horse that was even remotely close to that blistering pace and still was fighting back after all the other horses were virtually eased in the race. I mean, literally eased, the ones that were closed up there. He was still fighting back and battling bravely. And you talk about gaining my respect, not that he cares about that, but I respect him now because that was a terrific performance. I think both the first two finishers really were worthy of a Kentucky Derby type of win. And I'm curious to ask you now, Jeremy, because I thought about this and I need some help. Who do you think is going to be the better colt from here on in? You've got the Derby winner who's lightly raced and ran great. And then you got Two Phils who proved his Turfway race was no fluke. And you can't run any better than that. He's not going to get into many more races where he's going to be battling on a 45 and small change half and still go on with it. So how do you view these two horses from here on in?
At 1 1/8, it's a coin flip. It's the 1 1/4 where you think maybe Mage, that there's a little bit more there in terms of the stamina and finishing ability, the upside to still go with it. at a mile and an eighth and the brilliance and Two Phil's having the tactical advantage in terms of early speed. Like, so if they ran in the Haskell, it's a photo finish. Those two at a mile and an eighth on a fast track like we get at Monmouth Park. But if they ran in the Travers at a mile and a quarter and the track at Saratoga is not quite as fast and it's not, just handing races over to speed and things like that, then maybe Two Phil's comes back to Mage, and Mage is the better Travers horse and Two Phil's is the better Haskell horse. It really depends on the situation moving forward. And of course, the ultimate neutral site becomes Breeders' Cup mile and a quarter at Santa Anita in the fall, right? I mean, neither one is from out there. If they were to head out that way on a neutral site at a mile and a quarter, that's what we're all waiting to see, at the end of the year when it comes to these kind of horses. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't think we've seen like the top end of both of them yet. I think Two Phil's is getting much better. His race at Turfway was really, really, really good.
Top number in the field. Yeah. Based on that race.
He was just competitive in New Orleans before that, right? And so you were a little bit worried that did the synthetic move him up? When he went there. I thought, but he's by Hard Spun, who ran really big on the synthetic at Turfway in the same prep race before running second to Street Sense in the Derby. Now, just like father and son, they're second place finishers. Hard Spun, people forget, went on that year to win the Haskell, win the King's Bishop, turning back to 7/8. Nobody does that. And then Hard Spun stretched back out to a mile and a quarter and ran second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So if he's like his dad, Two Phil's, he could do anything. He could go shorter. He could go longer. He could go synthetic. He could be a great miler. He can, at a mile and a quarter, he could be awfully damn competitive, just like, Hard Spun was second in the Derby, second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So sky's the limit, I think, still for him. And Mage, obviously, sky's the limit. He's only run 4 times. He didn't even make it to the track until late January this year. There's no telling how good he could be. We'll see. I mean, let's keep our fingers crossed that he remains in training for a long time. And, we get to see several more races out of him. First up, the Preakness. We've got to get him to Baltimore first. There's no commitment there that they have to run in the next step. But I would assume that if he comes out of the race in decent order, the connections have hinted that they would go to Baltimore if he comes out of the race in good shape. They may not if he doesn't.
Yeah. One thing about Mage that I want to bring up is that we had a situation here with Two Phil's pressing the pace and Mage coming from way back. But Mage does not run normally that way. He's got speed, and he didn't break, and he got behind horses, and he was able to improvise the jockey and the horse, and that even gains me more respect than anything else because he wasn't supposed to be that far back. So, and I don't think he will be the next time he runs. I don't think he will be. I'm not saying he'll be necessarily in front of Two Phil's, but Two Phil's, as fast as he is, he's not necessarily a speed horse. I mean, he just isn't,
Right,
so
right.
They both kind of ran maybe opposite of what their best running style is, and they both still performed great, which is why I thought they both ran great, and I can't wait to see how they develop. And I hope that they knock on wood, stay healthy and go and can continue on, because these could be 2 exceptional racehorses. And again, the put it in the context. This was not just a low-rated Derby that these horses happened to run well. This was a fast Derby. Fast early, fast middle, very strong late. Numbers were good. I mean, we're looking at 2 terrific horses. And maybe some of the other ones that we thought, like I thought, that were good, maybe aren't as good as they maybe were all cracked up to be.
The beauty is we have the rest of the season to find out. It doesn't end right here. Now, as far as those other performances go, you picked out a horse you thought you had the best trip. I picked out a horse I thought that had the worst trip, and I want to give a shout out to the best-looking fan at this year's Kentucky Derby. His name's Jeff Carter. This from Eclipse Sports Wire. Their photographs there. But, man, when you've got that look going on, I'm not a big hat and suit person. Suits are fine. I'm not a big hat person. I get it with the Kentucky Derby. But that beard is out of this world, man. That is like – I don't know. You got like twin spires going 5 different directions. You got the stars, whatever you want to look at, but that's a great look there. You thought Hit Show had a really good trip in running 5th.
I did. I did, Jeremy. And this is the reason why I bring it up is because he had the rail, and that's supposed to be a death knell for any horse. He was sent out of the gate. He got a good trip. He saved ground. He didn't have to check. And then he was able to maneuver to the outside down the backstretch. He's a horse to follow because he's gray and he's wearing pink silks. How can you miss him, right? And he was in such a perfect spot going into the far turn. He was behind the pace duel, but he was in the clear. Nobody was outside of him, so the jock was just kind of sitting there waiting to pounce. he did pounce at the top of the stretch, had dead aim into the stretch, and hung on, as well as he could to finish fifth. But I think the trip kind of flatters him because because of that. But if you get a chance to go back, and anybody go back and watch it on YouTube again, you will see how the rail was certainly by no means a hindrance and actually put him in a great spot. I don't think Hit Show can run any better than that, but he still ran okay. And I think if they set their sights properly, there's a decent race for him somewhere down the road.
I think he'll get a shot in the Belmont Stakes because of that run all day kind of style. And Brad Cox does this Todd Pletcher plan, from Derby to Belmont, no race in between kind of thing. So I think we'll see Hit Show back in the Belmont Stakes. Now, Raise Cane is a horse who's really interesting in here because of any horse who had a bad trip, and he still finished 8th of 17. He could have been 3rd with a better trip, I think. He got stopped 2 times in this race, early into the far turn and then again in the upper stretch. This is an interesting horse because, he was so impressive in the Gotham and then, not quite as good in the next start. You thought maybe it was just the distance, but he ran a very, very good Kentucky Derby, and I think Raise Cane's going to surprise some people. Now, the really interesting thing about this, and it's after I even discussed the trip and made my notes for Countdown to the Crown about the trip, I noticed a tweet from Jeff Ruby. Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, of course, sponsors the big race at Turfway, also sponsors several jockeys around the country. He was celebrating the victory for Javier Castellano in the Kentucky Derby and dissolved a little information, and Javier Castellano backed it up. We thought Javier Castellano was going to be riding Raise Cane in the Kentucky Derby, right? That was his original mount.
Right.
He took off to go ride Mage about a week after committing to Raise Cane. And it seemed like, well, you usually don't spin somebody for the Kentucky Derby. If the horse isn't injured, if you've committed, you committed. It turns out the reason Javier Castellano rode Mage was the owners, the Warrens of Raise Cane, would not let him wear the sponsor pants in the Kentucky Derby. And he wanted to honor his commitment to Jeff Ruby more than he wanted to honor his commitment to the owners of Raise Cane. And the owners of Mage said it's fine to wear the advertisement on your pants. And so Javier Castellano, 6,000 wins his whole career. He doesn't go to this horse to win the Kentucky Derby unless there's a sponsor with a squabble sponsor with the logo on his pants. It's like, you can't make this stuff up sometimes. It's unbelievable how kismet and fate happens. And he ends up on the Kentucky Derby winner. And then poor Raise Cane, he got the worst trip in the entire Derby. If he'd have gotten the skill of Castellano's ride, he might be in the winner's circle for the Kentucky Derby. I doubt it. I know I'm making a stretch there to think that Raise Cane would have won with a better trip, but I do think he might have hit the board. But nonetheless, the whole Castellano thing is just weird to me. It's like a sponsorship determine who you're going to ride in the Kentucky Derby.
Wow. Karma. I tell you what, I never had that problem. I don't even know what pants the jockeys are wearing when they ride my horses. I don't care. I'm more interested in how they ride them than what their pants look like. But anyway, so yeah,
a winner of the 149th Kentucky Derby. That's what you want to see on the pants.
Yeah, for sure. But that's a good note. I'll have to go back and watch that Colt. And by the way, if anybody who wants to watch the Derby, and as you do all the time, you watch every horse, every trip. I suggest you use the track feed because they have a pan every step of the way, and it's so easy to follow every horse. Whereas the NBC is a little more artsy and all that, but sometimes you lose the position. So if you really do, and they're both on YouTube, I think. I know that the track feed at Churchill, the one that I'm referring to, the better version, is on the Express Bet replay center. That you can get it from there. So if you can't find it, go to Express Bet, punch up the horse's name or the date. You'll see it, and it's a very clear view of the entire race. You never lose sight of any horse, so it's a good way to go.
Yeah, NBC really focused on the first 5 or 6 for a
while. And then
very rarely got to even get a pan shot of the whole field. So
right.
It was difficult to follow some of the come from behind strictly off of that feed. Let's go to our fourth topic here, and some horses that were they compromised in the Derby or were they exposed as not quite as good as we thought. 2 of those were Derma Sotogake and also Tapit Trice. These were the among the top 4 or 5 wagering choices. Tapit Trice second choice in the betting. I think Dermot Sotogake closed as the 4th choice. Dermot Sotogake on the left, showing from his training when he was schooling in the gate earlier in the week. Maybe a little more schooling in the gate would have helped him in the way that it turned out, Jeff. Though, tongue in cheek by saying that, Tapit Trice trained really well leading up to the Derby and didn't quite deliver the goods that we were expecting of these two. They ended up 6th and 7th, I think, respectively in the field. Your thoughts on Tapit Trice?
Well, I was I made an assumption that turned out to be not true. And that is that I thought Tapit Trice, because he trained well, although he always trains well, so I shouldn't have counted too much on that. Although he trained well, and although his numbers were rising, and he looked like a colt that was going to love a mile and a quarter, and he had all these kinds of positive things leading up to the race that convinced me he was going to run well. You and I talked about it, and everybody talked about it. He doesn't get out of the gate well. He's going to get dirt in his face. He's going to be way far back, and he's going to have a lot of difficulties making it up because he does not have a turn of foot. He's kind of a one-pace grinder.
Right.
But given the trip that he had when he was far removed from the fast pace, angled to the outside, in the clear, rallied wide, just where you wanted to be, because he was a horse that would build up his momentum, and you don't want to get stopped. Everything I thought went right for him to the quarter pole. And then top of the stretch, he's the big gray horse on the outside, and he's supposed to come, maybe not get up, but get going. And he went absolutely nowhere. I mean, he was up and down, up and down. Yeah. He ran like a camel. And to me, up and down, no acceleration, nothing, never was in the hunt. And, after the race was over, I said, I should have listened to my inner feelings about him, because for all the good things that I tried to believe in him, there was that one big thing was maybe, he really isn't that good. And the funny thing is, in the Bluegrass, the horse that he beat came back and got beat out 50 lengths, so verifying. So that race turned out to be a dud, and the number was inflated, and I learned my lesson on that one. And I tell you what, given this stage of his career, when he's had enough racing now, I am not bullish at all on Tapit Trice becoming the kind of horse that everybody, including me, thought he had the potential to be. I think he's peaked and falling back, and I don't expect to see him win a big race. I'm sorry. People are going to say, what about the Belmont? I just don't think he's good enough to win. So.
Right.
We'll see.
And I think that's where he'll be next. And the Tapits have all that success, and Pletcher's had all that success. He's going to be a big underlay in the Belmont Stakes.
Sure.
I think he's going to get a lot of momentum to that. And based on your words, he's not going to be on your ticket come Belmont Stakes time. Another horse who won't be in the rest of the Triple Crown is Dermot Sotogake. The 3 horses from Japan have already departed Churchill Downs and are heading back to the land of the rising sun, and they will run in races in their home country. Maybe we get to see them back here for the Breeders' Cup in the fall at Santa Anita. It'd be a little shorter trip. Maybe. But as far as the performance from Dermot Sotogake in Derby 149, Jeff, I thought he would be up near the pace, not necessarily having to take the lead, but I thought he'd be in the top 3 or 4. When he broke last of all, the slowest horse to leave the starting gate, it was makeup mode from that point forward. And I know he closed in some of the races in Japan, but against 17 other horses in an 18-horse field, he just had to do too much. Right.
I had this flashback back in the early 90s. I can't remember if it was 93 or 94. I don't remember. But I was alive in the pick 6 to a colt named Bracco. And I had a friend of mine who was up there. We had split the ticket. We were on the roof at Churchill Downs. We managed to get to the roof to watch the race. It's the best place to watch it. The problem is you can't hear anything because the audio doesn't go that high, apparently.
Yeah.
So we're watching, and I'm watching with my binoculars, and I had binoculars. My friend did not. So he says, tell me how he breaks. So I said, I will.
Right.
So I'm watching, and they're off. We're dead. I said, we're dead 0.8 of a second after the start of that race because he got left, and he ran well. He just wasn't good enough to overcome that. Well, I got the same feeling. I'm watching. I'm focusing on Dermot Sotogake, and they're off. We're dead because he was going to get behind horses. It's not that he couldn't come from behind to win. He couldn't come from 16th to win. That's not. And he made this huge extended run to get right there. And to his credit, he stayed on pretty well in the final stage.
Right.
But if he had even broken moderately, and I don't, and by the way, the trainer said the same thing. I said, I knew we were dead 2 steps out of the gate. Yeah. The jockey doesn't want to give excuses. Well, he didn't say that much, but I knew that he was going to be given for his style. Yes, he'd come from off the pace, but not that far back in Japan. He was, sitting 5th or 6th. He can do it. So I was disappointed in the start. I thought he ran under the circumstances reasonably well. Maybe not good enough to win, but reasonably well. Right. He's going back to Japan. He'll run sometime in July in the Japan Derby. I don't know what it's going to take to win a race like that, but I would hope that we get a chance to see him again at Santa Anita for the Breeders' Cup. I don't know what their plans are now, but something I also thought for some reason I had that fear that if he didn't break, some horses, they could overcome it. I didn't think he could, and he tried, but he just couldn't do it.
The interesting thing is he didn't break. Cyclone Mischief didn't break from the outside. Right. There was none of that outside speed crossing over the field that you see every year that causes that cavalry charge under the wire the first time. Everything from the inside went to the front. Everything on the outside was either mid-pack or in the back. And so they just kind of went like a bird formation across the track. And so nobody got in front of each other. There was no checking. There was nothing through the first quarter of mile that you're used to seeing in the Derby. That's what 2 fills gets extracted out of there. No problem. Verifying from the 2-hole. No problem. Hit show, even without a ton of speed, showed more speed than usual.
Right up in there.
Nobody came down on him either. He got a dream trip. You're just not going to see that in many derbies, and that's because none of the outside horses who had any speed broke. Once they start doing that beeline, from right to left towards the rail, that's where all the chain ring action usually happens in the Kentucky Derby, and everybody's taking up and banging into each other. None of that happened in this race, and it just kind of flowed out of there like a slinky, and it was just a really interesting field that made you say that the best horse won, because there was not a lot of excuses in this race. And to me, Mage was definitely the best horse on this first Saturday in May. Other good performances over the course of the weekend. We'll hit these a little bit quicker. The undercard underpinnings. We had the Kentucky Oaks on Friday, and it was a filly, Pretty Mischievous, who had done well at Fairgrounds until the final race of the series, where you thought, well, maybe she's not the one for the Oaks, but she got right back on the beam for a red-hot trainer. Let's go back and look at the Kentucky Oaks from last week.
Wet Paint still about 8 lengths behind as they come to the top of the stretch. And they're into the stretch of the Kentucky Oaks. And Pretty Mischievous has taken the lead on the outside. The Alice Look is trying to put in a run as they come into the final furlong. And here comes Gambling Girl. And she's coming with a rush in the center of the track. Pretty Mischievous to catch. Gambling Girl to the outside, coming after her. Gambling Girl and Pretty Mischievous, these two down to the wire. Pretty Mischievous, Gambling Girl. Pretty Mischievous wins the Kentucky Oaks. Gambling Girl was second, then Wet Paint, followed by the Alice Look and North Vader. The final time was 1:49.77 seconds.
So Tyler Gaffleone and Pretty Mischievous from the outside post, and Brendan Walsh's run continues. He was spectacular at Keeneland. He won 3 of 3, I think, on Thursday or something, Wednesday or Thursday of Derby week. Then he comes back and wins the Oaks. His barn was just smoking this weekend, and a big win there for Pretty Mischievous, just holding off Gambling Girl. That could have been the Pletcher Rapoli kind of savior of a bad weekend story, but they came up just short.
That's a good filly. By the way, go back and watch that race closer from start to finish. You talk about losing ground. I mean, she was wide every step of the way and still came on and won the race. That's a good filly. I know. I'm not sure how she managed to lose her last race, but her previous race at Fairgrounds was good. She's the leader in the division right now. I'm not sure what happened to Wet Paint. Maybe she was a little closer to the pace than maybe she wanted to be, and she was not allowed to drop way back and make that Silky Sullivan type of late kick, which maybe she needs to do to be at her best. So right now she's the leader. We'll see Faiza in the Black Eyed Susan, I think, on Preakness week. She's undefeated. I saw her breeze the other day. She looks unbelievably good. So I think these two might rise to the top now, and but a legitimate performance and a really, really good filly. I give credit to the winner again. best filly won.
Did the best filly win the Derby City Distaff? That's a question to ask, as the big favorite Goodnight Olive was in a world of trouble throughout the lane.
And they're into the stretch, and it is Monterey. Goodnight Olive trying to find a seam in between horses, just to the inside of Wicked Halo. Still, Monterey a furlong to run. Wicked Halo to the outside. Goodnight Olive is down toward the rail. Monterey is still there. Wicked Halo, Goodnight Olive's going to split him and try to come on late, but there's no room, and Monterey won it. Wicked Halo was second. A trouble trip for Goodnight Olive. She has to settle for third.
If you were frustrated as a bettor, imagine Irad Ortiz in that, because he came back and won the next race on the card, and you'd have thought he won the Dubai World Cup the way he was pumping his fist and flagging after he won the next race. He got even with Tyler Caplione after that one, after being pinned in. Your thoughts on Goodnight Olive, the Derby City Distaff to win by Monterey?
Saw it coming a mile away, didn't you? I mean, she's down to the inside, and the filly on the lead's probably not going to give it up, and the filly who's just on the outside is good enough to maintain her position. Yeah. And unless Goodnight Olive was one of the bulldozers her way through, she was going to get trapped. I thought maybe there was just a brief moment there outside the eighth pole where he could have dove to the rail, but he probably got shut off there. So there was just nothing he could do. It's not like it cost her an undefeated record, because she actually got beat somehow in her debut. Mm-hmm. So it's just a loss, but there'll be better days for Goodnight Olive, I'm sure. And next time, I'm sure she'll be able to show her best. But that's race riding at its best, and it's all legal. And and by the way, Marte is not a bad filly. I mean, she's okay. I mean, she went a little stale in the test last year and was a little short in the matron. She's back in winning form, and I think these fillies will meet again somewhere down the road, and it'll be worth watching.
Good filly and mare sprint division for sure. Now, Breeders' Cup champion Goodnight Olive was defeated on the Churchill Downs weekend for the Derby. But another Breeders' Cup champ, dirt mile winner Cody's Wish, would have none of that defeat talk. He was impressed.
Cody's Wish is starting to pick off horses on the far outside. He's coming wide. He's about to move up into fifth, but still work to do. He's 6 lengths behind as they come toward the top of the stretch. It is Hoist the Gold on the inside. Hear My Song on the outside. The two of them turn for home together, and Cody's Wish is coming. He's coming now on the far outside as they come into the final furlong. Cody's Wish roars by. Cody's Wish is pouring it on. He opens up 3. He opens up 4 legs. Cody's Wish. Yes, he did it, Cody. He did it again.
He did it again, indeed. Cody's Wish, Jeff. I don't know if he's better around 1 turn or 2. I thought maybe 2, but that race there tells me that was a pretty good-looking 7/8 runner.
He's won now 8 out of his last 9 starts. His only defeat he managed to get himself beat into grade 3 at Tampa Bay in March of his last year. I don't know.
Scalding, right? Was Scalding?
How about that happened? But this is we all know about the story and the backstory of this horse, and it's a great story and all that. But somehow I want to also appreciate not only the horse, but the job that Bill Mott's done with him to keep him in such great form now at age 5. And you've got the entire year now to work with, and being by Curlin and out of a mare by Tappet, and having won the Breeders' Cup Dirt. How ambitious do you think Mott's going to get? Now, he could keep him around 1 turn. He runs in the Met Mile. Right. He could go in the 4-go. He could win races pretty much like he won last year. Or in his advanced age at 5, do you think he's got the possibility of trying something new, like stepping out of his comfort zone and maybe going after some of those classic races and maybe the Breeders' Cup Classic itself?
I don't know about the Classic, but the way to get there may be the Whitney. And that's a race where a lot of fast horses over the years at Saratoga have tried to go longer. It's a 1.1 miles. They get that short run to the first turn at Saratoga. Speed does well in a race like that at the Spa. And so if you're going to try a 1.1 miles against the big boys in the handicap division, in the Classic division, maybe Cody's Wish trying the Whitney at a 1.1 miles wouldn't be that bad of a spot. Then if you win that, then you say, well, geez, would we try another eighth of a mile? You know, I
Right.
mean, it's like
Yeah.
you're not making that huge leap and that, wondering about it at that point. If you got a horse who wins the Whitney at Saratoga, you've got a horse who belongs in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And then you just find out if you can get the 1.25 miles. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see him in the Whitney come this summer. I mean, you're going to run back in the 4-go or something like that, or try to shorten the 6. Nah, it might not be the best,
No.
So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if we couldn't end up seeing him in the Breeders' Cup Classic by year's end. And if he does so, maybe through the Whitney.
Well, he won the 4-go last year, won the Breeders' Cup Dirt. If you're going to keep him in training, you might as well try to expand your resume a little bit, And if he doesn't run that far, okay, you find out at Saratoga. You back him up. You freshen him. But he's such a neat horse.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's just a really, really top horse. And you combine that with the storyline, and they have a chance to really, elevate the game a little bit here, I think. And I hope they do.
Once upon a time, horses mixed around between sprints and routes. You would sprint an easy goer his first start of the year. Precisionist could run long, could run short. We're going back to the 80s here, but like a really good horse could be fast enough to win at 7 furlongs and also be good enough to win going longer. So I'm with you. I'd like to see a little shot at him stretch out. Now, look, it wasn't all a loss for Todd Pletcher over the weekend. He did lose somehow, we thought, unbelievably, with Money's Gold. Couldn't be beat in the stakes race where she showed up in the La Troyenne. But Pletcher got even with all the heartbreak, all the disappointment. He had one really good one on the turf. Let's go back and take a look at the Turf Classic, where we've got a rising star in the division.
Santine up top. Here comes up to the mark and around Ortiz, making their move on the far outside. They have taken over the lead with 1 furlong to run. From the back of the pack, Hong Kong Harry has moved up into second. Then it's Santine in third. But it is up to the mark, and he was up to the 10. Big time today. He won it by 4.
If we don't win turf races by that kind of margin often, that was very impressive. And Pletcher's had some good turfers in recent years, Colonel Liam, etc. But this one looks like the arc is going really high.
This is only his 9th career start. He doesn't really have what you call a grass pedigree. He's by not this time. He was the son of Giants Causeway, obviously. But I actually like the horse in this race, Hong Kong Harry, and he ran as well as I had hoped that he could run. I have no problem with the effort, the performance. That's what he is. But I underestimated up to the mark. And the reason I did that is because he was a well-beaten third, beaten almost 4 lengths by Chez Pierre. And you know how much you and I like about Chez Pierre? Well, you know something? Yeah. Now Chez Pierre gets elevated again because he just absolutely destroyed up to the mark. And nobody's going to destroy that colt the rest of the year based on that race. So, I mean, all he did was Frank the Maker's mark form, which, by the way, had Modern Games behind him as well. Actually, so I mean, just a terrific performance, and I'm glad to see the American Turf Division perk up a little bit. Usually it's the same old, but we got some stars we can follow now throughout this summer and in the fall now.
Yeah, absolutely. One final race before we wrap up almost an hour-long edition of our Kentucky Derby recap. I'm doing it because I'm biased. I love me some Smile Happy, and he ran the race of his career in the Ali Shiva last weekend. He took on the Pegasus World Cup winner, Art Collector. Last year's Kentucky Derby winner was in there, Rich Strike. You had the big favorite in the race for Brad Cox, and Smile Happy said, don't forget about me.
Sonny Leone is motivating Rich Strike. He is still last. He has not made a run, and he's lost some ground here. He's about 10 lengths behind as they come to the top of the stretch in the Ali Shiva. And here comes Art Collector swinging up outside of Smile Happy as West Willpower gives way. And as they come to the 8th pole, Rich Strike still last. He just never moved up today. 1 furlong to go. Smile Happy, Art Collector running outside. These two will decide it. Smile Happy has the inside. Art Collector has the outside. And Smile Happy's going to do it. Art Collector second best under the wire. West Willpower finished third. Rich Strike ended up passing one horse. He was 5th in the Ali Shiva Stakes.
legitimate grade 1 stakes race with the quality of horses that were in there. West Willpower was the Cox favorite. I couldn't come up with the name right before the race, but Smile Happy, since his career debut, he won 2 turning and a maiden special at Keeneland in the fall meet, and he did it so impressively. Nobody wins going 2 turns first time at Keeneland and a maiden special in the fall in the 2-year-old ranks. It just doesn't happen. It's so rare. And when he did it and looked so good doing it, I just said, I love this horse. And I've been backing him, I didn't think he could beat that quality of horses in the Ali Sheba at that trip, but man, is he getting good now?
Well, that race was the best race of his career based on visuals, based on the speed figure that he got. No matter what speed figure system you subscribe to, it was huge. And he did it the right way. He pressed a good pace. He put away a really good colt like he was a claimant horse, just disposed of him, held off whatever late speed there was, won in full stride with something left. That's a major performance. And if he can run like that the rest of the year, he's going to be, that's a serious horse. And like I said, sometimes it takes a while after, going through that Triple Crown campaign to bounce back. Well, he's bounced back now as a 4-year-old.
Yep.
Good colt. Great race. One of the best we saw in the 2 days of racing we had at Churchill Downs last week.
And we had a lot of good racing. Look, I know we talked a lot of negatives at the top. It's what we have to do. But if we're going to get forward with the game, we're going to talk about those kind of issues head on, and we're going to try to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. So we hope you enjoyed this extended version of a Kentucky Derby recap show. On to the Preakness next week. When we talk to you on Tuesday, we will already know the field for Black Eyed Susan Day Friday and Preakness Day on Saturday. Both will be drawn Sunday and Monday. So we'll know everything by this time next week, and we'll have a special edition of It's Official to go back inside of the Preakness digital wager guide. So our first Preakness wager guide will be published a week from today as well. So really looking forward to having a lot of great content for you for the middle jewel of the Triple Crown coming up. And hats off to the horse players out there, Jeff. $307,000 bet into the Preakness future wager.
Yeah.
Unbelievable total. That's a larger pool than any of the 6 Kentucky Derby future wagers this year. Derby future wagers over 20 years old. This thing came out of nowhere, handled $307,000. And if you bet Mage, you're sitting on 25-1. So you're saying, please run at 25-1. What a price that'll be in the Preakness.
Unless there's something physical, he's running. There's only one Triple Crown, and based on what I saw, he's got a good chance next time and the time after that as well. So exciting times for him, and can't wait for the dust to settle. Got a couple of California horses I know that are planning to fly out. So I don't think that's what happens with the Preakness. You get a lot of new shooters, and it makes for a different race. And so it'll be interesting to see who shows up. I can't wait for Pimlico and the Preakness week and the Black Eyed Susan and all the good racing coming up. That's not this week, of course. It's the following week. So, but we'll be doing our due diligence before then, and then we'll talk to you Friday with our handicapping, and then next Tuesday we'll look at the Preakness and the Black Eyed Susan.
Some interesting racing this weekend as Gulfstream Park has 2 stakes, the Royal Palm Juvenile and Royal Palm Juvenile Fillies. They're turf sprint stakes for 2-year-olds that will be win in your ins for Royal Ascot. The qualifiers, the horses who win those races this weekend at Gulfstream will get all expenses paid trip and berths into the big races at Royal Ascot coming up this summer. So kind of a fun twist to that. Jeff and I will talk about that Friday, as he mentioned, on the First Call podcast. On behalf of everybody with First Technologies, my partner Jeff Siegel, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Hope you enjoyed Derby 149. We'll talk to you next week for the Preakness.